I will start, of course, with what the papers are reporting this morning, and then we delve into, the real issues by analyzing what the budget, means for you, so that we can all understand where we are in terms of this budget that has been presented to us in Parliament. But let's start with the news review now. And the Daily Graphic says budget target growth in 2026 prioritizes agric, which is great there, agric transformation, infrastructure development. These two can really help move the economy forward. Get details of that story on page 3 of the Daily Graphic newspaper. On the front page, government to create 800,000 jobs. Whoa. Get details on page 13 of the paper. And also, Parliament approves Justice Bafo-Boni as new Chief Justice. So here we have it. Justice Bafo-Boni becomes the new CJ. All right, on the back page, 3.1 million cedis worth of onions rot at Ajin Kotoku market. Really? 3.1 million worth of onions. Why? What happened? Well, get the story on the back page of the paper. From the Daily Graphic, let's do the Daily Guide newspaper. It says, Parliament okays Bafo-Boni. NSA scandal, gift your worry out. Or CSB bail now 623 million Ghana cedis. Whoa. Okay, get details of that story there. Now, budget is still being talked about here. 2026 budget statement, government unveils sweeping VAT reforms. I'm sure you followed the budget reading yesterday, and you heard about the VAT rationalization that the minister talked about, but we'll delve more into it here on the show. Government withdraws over 1.4 billion cedis from the District Assembly Common Fund account. That's according to the minority. So get the details of that story on page 6 of the paper there. And I hope you remember our former Vice President, Alhaji Aliyu Mahama. We're told that his 13th Adua comes off on Sunday. I think that will be 13 years since he passed on there. So join the family for them to, remember such a great man of our land. Let's do the custodian newspaper now. Minority accuses Atuforson of illegal 1.4 billion cedis DACF withdrawal. So get details of that story there. Government to spend over 357 billion Ghana cedis in 2026. What does that mean? The finance guys will break it down for us. Some of us, we are only farmers and journalists, right? So we'll get the finance people to help us understand or make sense of this. Minority demand suspension of military recruitment exercise. It comes to the picture of Reverend John in Team Fojo. It comes at the back of what the stampede that happened at the Elwak Stadium. And dragging for resident in Kumasi, unfair and unjust. Dr. Buako fumes. And Mahama unveils in Kukonketenkete initiative to reduce poultry imports. I mean, I'm happy anytime I see import substitution initiatives, because we have a lot we can contribute in our own motherland, Ghana. And then the invitation to the 13th commemorative Adua of the late former Vice President, His Excellency Aliyu Mahama, will be coming. You're being invited. It's coming off on Sunday, 16 November 2025 at 9 a.m. at number 4 Switchback Road, Cantonment. Please be there. Special guest will be National Chief Imam Sheikh Osman Nuhu Shaributu there. But on the back page, government to create 800,000 jobs. That is the Atuforson made revelation. So you can get details of this story at the back page of the custodian. Government may struggle to March 2025 budget discipline. Professor assuming, so I'll ask the professors here, the finance guys, will government struggle to maintain the discipline in this year? And Energy Ministry to distribute 457,000 LPG stoves to citizens in 2 years. All right, let's do the insights now. Ghana's 2026 budget presentation, government scraps COVID-19 levy. That was expected. It's been delivered. So we'll talk more about that. Says the economy has recovered. Confidence is returning. Over 1 million years of children's lives lost in Gaza during Israel's genocide. Steady finds. Whoa, 1 million anyway. Ghana's investment delegation concludes successful tour of India. Okay, EPA Deputy Director hails Mahama Amaboa. Okay, so the name is Amaboa. Applauds government united front against Galamsey. Eugene Entry vows to restore discipline and unity in the MPP. And a true pillar of dedication, celebrating Alhaji Osman Abdullah's service to Awutu Senya East NDC. Okay, let's move on to other papers. The News Center. Mobile Money Fintech Limited to run MTN Ghana's mobile money business. Okay, all right then. Some good news happening in the fintech world. Detailed breakdown of how 357 billion cedis will be spent in 2026. News Center has taken its time to break it down for you. Story is on page 9 of that paper. 4.8% growth, 357 billion cedis expenditure, primary surplus of 1.5% of GDP in 2026, according to the Finance Minister, Dr. Atto Forson. And I'm happy that we've empaneled some finance brains to help us break down the budget for you. So stay with us. Parliament approves Justice Paul Bafuboni as new CJ. Tana North MP condemns mass arrest in Ahafo region. And at the back page, it explains the 800,000 jobs government said it will create in 2026. And also the 401 million Ghana cedis allocated to Women's Development Bank in 2026 budget. And government allocate 5.1 billion cedis for cocoa support, 50 farmer centers, 200 million cedis for buffer stock company. This is to mop up the grace that we have in the system. Of course, farmers have been crying about the glut we have in the system. Okay, let's do other papers now here. And let me see. Okay, I think that my system is decided. But these are what the papers are reporting. You might as well. Let me try and see if, okay, good. So the Catalyst says 2026 budget powers research agenda forward. So more of the papers are still talking about the 2026 budget because, of course, it's the biggest story coming up. Now, NIMOS overpowers armed thugs in our win there. So these are the papers we have for you. Let's do Major Online, the CIMG News Portal of the year 2024. And if you go onto Major Online, it will blow your mind. Atto Forson hints at explosive audit report to drop next week. It talks about some report that they did into some expenditure that they feel that the details are explosive. So watch out for that. How we have vetted Doomsday Finance Minister reviews $252 million rescue deal with IPPs. He says now they are, current when it comes to payment of, invoices being presented by the independent power producers. Again, 13 billion Ghana cedis ghost payment stopped. Hey, 13 billion. Atto Forson reviews fictitious heist caught before approval. Whoa, 13 billion cedis ghost payment. All right, get details of that story on myjoyonline.com. Now, if you are too popular with MDAs as finance minister, something is wrong. Atto Forson has been explaining. And Mahama administration isn't just stabilizing an economy, it's rebuilding a nation, according to the finance minister. And you know what? Away from that, KKD, you know him, the popular KKD, has been appointed Ghana's special envoy to the Caribbean. The legendary media personality and fashionista has been appointed as the Ghana special envoy to the Caribbean. I'm not in a hurry to go to the capital market and borrow, Atto Forson says. So those are the details there by the papers. Let's now get into the details by welcoming in my guests who are already in studio. From my far left is the Dean of Accounting and Finance of UPSA, Professor Isaac Body. Prof, good morning.
Good morning.
Trust all is well.
Very well.
And thanks for joining us here.
Thank you.
And then Hamza Suhini, It's been some days since I met him. I don't know where he's been hiding, but you and I thought I would be in touch like that.
Of course. I traveled out briefly.
Oh, okay.
And back, so.
And how has it been?
It's been quite promising, and that strength of faith was further enhanced yesterday by the progressive presentation of Dr. Kesela Tufosin, the Finance Minister of the Republic of Ghana. Not just the usual budgetary presentation, but yesterday we saw policy grounded in action. And we can only hope and pray that we get the needed support to drive the needed investments in our country and begin to change the fundamental structure of our economy. And I think that was the blueprint he presented to the Republic of Ghana yesterday. It is now our duty as citizens of the Republic of Ghana to partner effectively by taking advantage of the many opportunities that this budget throws out, to see how we can collectively, and even in our individual perspectives, support government to realize that overall objective of changing the structure of the Ghanaian economy. So for me, yesterday enhanced my faith in the ability of this country to turn things around, especially demonstrated in the last 10 months of the Mahama administration. So there's hope.
Okay. All right then. Amos Ose Wusu-Ansa is Associate Director, KPMG. EDAS as an International Development Advisory. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Okay. And I hope that, before the budget we spoke.
We did.
And now the budget has been presented, we're going to speak again. We're going to see whether or not what you expected were on.
Right.
We'll also be joined by Dr. Theo Achampon. He is Technical Advisor, Ministry of Finance. I don't know if Doc is on Zoom now. We'll be joining him. We'll be getting him shortly. But so let me come in studio. I'll start with Professor Body. Yeah. Prof, you listened to the budget as well. Were your expectations met?
Yeah, good morning once again to my colleagues and to your viewers as well. Before I even answer that question, I must thank your outfit for your support during our program. We had a program on EPSA. The Faculty of Accounting and Finance we rewarded some trailblazers, people of excel in the banking and finance space. Anand Dani, and then Efa, and then Frank Adu, and one Wilfred in the insurance space. So we are grateful for your support. Back to your question, I think just like any other Ghanaian, you may have expectations when budgets are about to be read. And I've been saying time and time again that we don't call this budget, they are called estimates. When we have the final approval from Parliament House, then we can say it's a budget. But now they are all estimates presented by the Minister of Finance. And that's a ritual thing that happens all the time. Let me make a few comments on this. My initial reaction had to do with the late presentation of the budget. Look at the time that these MPs had to sit. At a point, some were sleeping. They were tired, I'm sure, because of the earlier approval for the Chief Justice that dragged into late in the night. But I wish they could have had another opportunity, because this is a critical, I think it started around 5 or 6 or so and moved all the way to late in the night. So next time they should look at it very well. And then the minister's input from the market women, folks, 2 days at a time, he had to do the exercise. It shouldn't be a top-down approach all the time. I've been in the government sector before. I've worked at a budget analyst for some assemblies. And we take inputs all the time. When you need input from the market force, you do it months or weeks. That will help with the input. At least it was a good attempt going to the market to get their views, but we can do better than that. Where are we now before you can even have expectation? Where are we as a country? We have achieved micro stabilization for a while. If you talk about exchange rates, it's reduced. If you look at inflation, it halved, deficit narrowed. So we can say we have seen some positive signs from this administration. Some targets that were set before the budget was read. We had targets, for instance, real GDP 4%. We have achieved 6.3 or so. We have non-oil growth about 4.8. It's almost about 7.8. Then we have that of a selling target and achieving the GDP agric. It's almost about 9 points. I think agric is 5.3. And then if you look at service sector, we are looking at 2.3. And then where we have not performed well, agric and the service. So when the budget was about to read, I had expectations that the government would give us practical solutions to our problem. For instance, giving me solution to how we increase the capex, the capital, allocations for projects. I was looking at that. And then in terms of quality of growth as a country, when a country, we are growing, but the growth is in the service sector, sometimes we have a problem because the service sector will not employ more than any other sector. For instance, if you go to agric, that employs more. And if you increase your allocations or do well in agric, you are invariably helping boost production in the country. So these were my initial, where they met, I would say, well, in terms of the numbers we have seen, we have not had time. It was read yesterday. And this morning we had to take dawn, we had to read few pieces of the budget. We'll have a full-blown discussions in weeks ahead of us. And that is the Institute of Economic Research and Public Policy. We'll have a full presentation on the budget. But in terms of expectations, few things were met. But I think that allocations, and I tell people, if you want to really understand the budget, don't look at the budget. Look at the appropriation bill when they are passed. Because that is where the real allocations will be approved. These are the budget presented to the minister. And what we do in terms of budget, we only present revenue estimate, we present expenditure priorities, then the government will tell us key performance sectors, and then it gives us initiatives and reforms. That's what the budget will tell us. I was looking at real reforms of this administration. And the government tells us there will be acceleration of economic and transformation agenda. Microeconomic stabilization were some of the things that the government talked about. So on the whole, yes, we have seen signs of recovery. But I was looking at practical approach that will move the country from just stabilization to growth trajectory. And if you're able to go by what the minister said, they won't have a problem. But the point is that we are here to look at the few numbers that were projected in the budget statement. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I would come back to my other guest, but I'm told that we have Dr. Theo Acheampong on Zoom. Good morning to you, and thanks for joining.
Morning, and morning to your panelists and Ghanaians as well. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can clearly, and congrats on your appointment. I think we haven't spoken since the appointment came. A lot of us are looking.
Thank you.
We expect good things from you. We know what you can do, so we're happy for you.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. But before I come back to my panel, let me go for these clips. Dr. Stephen Amoah has been talking about the city. We'll also listen to the finance minister, and his take. And then about the fact that he says some 6 billion Ghana cedis will be put in the pocket of Ghanaians through the abolition of some taxes and levies. Listen to this one.
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to report to this House that we have finally delivered on that promise. Mr. Speaker, after months of detailed analysis and broad consultations with stakeholders, we have completed the design of modernized VAT system fit for Ghana's economic transformation agenda. Mr. Speaker, government is therefore submitting to this House today and for approval, Mr. Speaker, a bold package of VAT reforms that will make our tax system more equitable, transparent, and business-friendly. Right, Honorable Speaker, the new VAT reforms will do the following. We will abolish the COVID-19 health recovery levy. Mr. Speaker, we will abolish the decoupling of GET Fund and National Health Insurance levies from the VAT tax base. Mr. Speaker, we will abolish VAT on recognizance and prospecting of minerals. Mr. Speaker, we will reduce the effective VAT rate from 21.9 to 20%. Mr. Speaker, we will raise the VAT registration threshold from 200,000 to 750,000 cedis. Mr. Speaker, we will extend VAT zero rating on the supply of local manufacturing textiles to 2028. Mr. Speaker, for emphasis, we promise to abolish the COVID-19 levy. With the support of this House, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to say that I'm happy to announce that today, COVID-19 levy is accordingly abolished. Mr. Speaker, by abolishing the COVID-19 levy, government is putting 3.7 billion Ghana cedis in the pockets of individuals and businesses in 2026. Mr. Speaker, these reforms will also reduce the cost of doing business by as a result of subjecting GET Fund and NHIL levies to input businesses, Mr. Speaker. Altogether, the VAT reforms is expecting to give back nearly 6 billion Ghana cedis to businesses and households. We'll give it to you. Give it to you. 6 billion cedis, Mr. Speaker.
Black market with different rate. Bank of Ghana with different rate. Forest Bureau with different rate. Intimamon trauma will be very big now down. Let us begin to have a new paradigm shift. A shift that will build a very resilient economic framework. We can attain that stability that will give us economic independence.
All right, so those that was the finance minister, and then Dr. Stephen Amwa there. Let me bring in my friend Hamza Suyunis. Hamza, of course, yeah, you would love this budget, because you say this is what it takes for you to, deepen the sort of recovery that we're having.
I think that it is, without attempting to respond to the concerns being raised about in relation to the growth, it is important for me to point out that if you listened carefully to the minister responsible for finance yesterday, he didn't mince words when he indicated that the growth was largely attributable to the agriculture sector and that of the services sector. So clearly, there is already a path that we are on as a government, and we indicated our commitment to the agriculture sector from day one, when His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama gave his first State of the Nation address and called on Ghanaian youth, especially, to begin to look at the agricultural sector. That was the bedrock of the policy direction of this government in terms of our commitment to the agricultural sector. So the presentation yesterday gave credence to commitment on the part of government. Because if you look at many of the contributory factors, especially to the growth in the agricultural sector, it dovetails into the investments that were specifically made in the aquaculture sector, where for the first time now we have what we call the Fisheries Commission and an act regulating that particular sector, where they are mandated to deal with issues of illegal fishing within that enclave.
Sorry, I don't want to cut it, but the Fisheries Commission has always been there. It's not a
There's now a legal impetus that establishes that commission, and that's the point I'm making. And there's an act that was passed, I think, in 2020, just this year, 2025, Act 1146, if my memory serves me right. And also, quite apart from that, an amount of 100 million Ghana cedis was dedicated for fisheries development in the 2025 budget, intended to shore up that sector. So I was not surprised when the finance minister made statements to the effect that indeed that sector alone contributed about 7.7% to the agricultural growth that we recorded. Another important sector has to do with the cocoa industry. Indeed, remember once again, Kojo, that when we came into office, we indicated the challenges that we inherited in the agricultural sector, especially cocoa board. There seemed to be some progress in that sector, and it has also contributed meaningfully to this agricultural growth. I think somewhere last year, in 2024 specifically, there was a downturn of about 21.4%. Today, we have recorded a growth in the cocoa industry of about 1.4 or 8. We can still do better, but you need to appreciate where we are coming from. And that is the time that you will begin to appreciate these investments that we are making and the kind of benefits we are beginning to get from the sector. Kojo, like the finance minister indicated, we inherited an economy that was in a state of comatose. Indeed, we inherited an economy that was completely shut out of the capital markets. What that means is that we are unable to even borrow, even if we wanted to borrow as a government. Quite apart from that, many of our the international credit rating agencies had declared our economy to be in a junk status. The government itself had rolled out the domestic debt exchange program with its attendant challenges. Inflation was quite high in the region of about 22.39%, approximately 23%. Cost of borrowing, interest rates, somewhere 29.7%. Today, inflation, exchange rate was clearly unstable when we came into office. And so the first task of the John Dramani Mahama administration, like we've always indicated, was to ensure fiscal prudence so that we could get a handle on our macroeconomic stability. And many of the policies we've implemented, including austerity on the part of government spending, and also trying as much as possible not to engage in the reckless expenditure that characterized the last 8 years. So that made it easier for us to be able to get a handle on our macroeconomic indicators. But one important thing needs to be stated, that even in the midst of such interventions intended to ensure fiscal prudence, government also realized the implications that would have had on the ordinary Ghanaian. And we rolled out policies intended to lessen the burden. The removal of the e-levy under the 2025 budget, for example, then also management of the exchange rate that led to reduction in fuel prices. And you know the implication of fuel prices as far as the economy is concerned. And so many of these interventions, including an increment in the allocations to the livelihood empowerment against poverty, more injections into school feeding program, free sanitary pad, and the likes. In the midst of the economic challenges that we encountered, we realized that even in getting out of the woods, we still needed to take care of the Ghanaian people. And we did just that. So for me, listening to him yesterday, make the declaration that we are completely out of the woods, I did not doubt anything he said, because the figures, like the MPP used to tell us, they used to argue that they believe in data, but interestingly, these days they are running away from the data.
So you think we've recovered entirely?
Absolutely, absolutely. Not entirely, but in terms of macroeconomic indicators, I think that we are on a very sound footing. And that is why the minister indicated that we are at a stage of consolidating that gains. And he just didn't end there. The question then becomes, how do you consolidate those gains? And that is why he gave us what I call a three-pronged approach to consolidating the gains. First, modernizing agricultural production and job creation. And you see, insightfully, he just did not challenge us that this is the direction of government. He also gave commitments to the agricultural modernization and industry growth. And that is why he made references to the establishment of the farm service centers and the procurement of in excess of about 4,400 equipment intended to make these centers operational. What this will do is that it will throw out many job opportunities for many of our team and unemployed youth in the country. Quite apart from that, he announced the establishment of 3 garment industries intended to feed into the industrial drive of the country. Because you see, you can invest in all that you want in the agriculture sector. If you also fail to create market for local goods, it becomes a challenge. These days, we are having discussions around the glut situation that we all have. We are dealing with. Now, apart from boosting agriculture production with these interventions, the minister also announced a presidential directive that many of our state institutions, senior high schools, basic schools, now would have to buy goods from our local farmers. That is something we need to encourage. So we are creating the platform. While boosting agriculture production, we are also creating the platform for consumption of our locally produced agricultural products, and that is commendable. Okay. About 7 agro-processing factories, yes, but this is important. About 7 agro-processing factories are also intended to be rolled out in 2026. That also feeds into the narrative of industry and the commitment on the part of this government to more or less develop our industrial capacity as a country. It has the potential of throwing out jobs. And of course, the oil palm plantation. In estimates, I think that we are looking at approximately about 250,000 jobs to be thrown out from that sector because of the commitment of this government in that regard. And so these are all measurable. And Ghanaians can be pardoned or would be pardoned to measure the successes of what was presented yesterday after 2026. But knowing the president we have and the finance minister who is leading the charge, I'm pretty much confident that the story this time round will be different. Ghana will truly begin to take advantage of our agriculture sector and let it power our economic growth and consolidate the gains that we have made. And on a lighter note, you see, we may also be focusing on the quantitative significance of the presentations yesterday, but there's the need for us to also focus on the qualitative relevance of the finance minister and that of the president of the Republic of Ghana.
Okay.
Ojo,
right.
in the past, no, let me end on this note. In the past,
you end for me.
we are not dealing with noise and hype. We have not organized lectures. Dr. Atuforsen in opposition did not move from one university to the other, assuring the good people of this country of being the only economic messiah when it comes to the management of the economy. It is being driven by action. And that humility alone, in terms of how he's leading, speaks volumes of his ability to get the needed support from the public sector, the Ghanaian people, and also even the intelligentsia community like my brother, Professor Boydu. Because that humility does the magic on the ground. The ability to connect and the communication out there that I am not the alpha and omega. I am doing this with you people, including market women. Because for all you know, many of you down there have a better understanding of how to turn this economy around than many of those who are privileged with the opportunity to sit at the helm of economic development. Right. And that should not be lost on anybody.
I'm grateful.
The humility to drive government policy. Very, very important.
Thank you. Let me bring in Amos now. I mean, from where you sit, beyond the rhetorics, where does your hope lie in terms of the implementation and whether or not we can derive whatever we are being promised?
Thank you very much, Kojo. So, as you rightly indicated before the budget reading, we spoke and we talked about the pre-budget survey that KPMG conducted. So, in the pre-budget survey, our respondents clearly indicated that they had confidence in the economy because of the macroeconomic stability that we are seeing. But what they really were also looking to see is that we have real economic transformation just beyond the stability that we have seen, the fiscal discipline that we have seen. And then just before the reading was done, we also put a poll out there to say, what would you really like the government to prioritize? So is it fiscal discipline, ensuring that there is enough resource allocation to the key policy initiatives that the minister, it's mentioning? Is it driving private sector growth or creating the enabling environment for the private sector? What about revenue measures and making sure that we are boosting the revenue generation? So this is how they ranked these areas. That number one, they say, yes, we want the fiscal discipline to continue.
Okay.
And the minister yesterday indicated that, of course, this is going to continue. Number two, they said, make sufficient allocation to the key policy initiatives that are being announced. So again, there were a number of allocations that the minister, indicated. As Prof. Bodi mentioned, We will now need to look at the numbers and really see whether these are sufficient allocations being made. Private sector development was the third area that they indicated we should, the government should be looking at. And of course, the minister mentioned the 24-hour economy and what they were doing about it, the big push and the infrastructure that is being funded, which obviously is going to also create an enabling environment for the private sector. The tax measures that have also been introduced, announced, for instance, decoupling the levies from the VAT. At the moment, what happens is that when you buy a product, there is the levy, there is the NHIA levy, there is the Get Fund levy, which is then that 6% is added onto the percentage that you are paying on the service, and the total VAT is calculated on that amount, all right? But private sector, the businesses are not able to then deduct. The levies are not tax deductible, right? So they end up passing this cost also onto consumers. But Minister is saying is being decoupled. The fourth area they then put was the boosting revenue measures. Again, the question is, we are asking government to spend and create the infrastructure, but people are also seem not to be wanting government to raise more revenue, which is an interesting thing. Yeah. Which is an interesting thing. So from where we sit, based on the pre-budget survey we did and the poll that we also did, I think the policy direction, it's in the right direction. The policy is in the right direction from where we sit. But you made an interesting point about execution. I think execution is also critical, because one of the things that our respondents told us in the pre-budget survey, it's actually budget execution has been a challenge. And we saw that in the 2025 budget, that execution was low. So now these are things that the minister, the government wants to do. But how do we really execute and get these things done?
Let me bring in Dr. Theo Achampon, because Doc has made a post on his Facebook, and he says, this is a credible budget that consolidates Ghana's macro turnaround, anchors potentially delivers some transformation and job creation, and broadly protect and incrementally scales key social programs. Then he says the current macro reset better than what many, including myself, would have predicted 2 years ago. Nevertheless, it is still a path which is highly dependent on continued fiscal discipline, pushing through major energy sector and other SOE reforms, and having limited major external shocks, example gold and cocoa prices. Doc, from what you said, how do we ensure that even if a shock or any shock would erupt, the economy which we all see it to be rebounding will not suffer what we've seen in the past?
Thank you very much. And again, good morning to everyone. I think I'll come to that question in a moment, but just to echo some of the sentiments that have been expressed by the panelists in the room in terms of, the budget being one of the key anchors to communicate, right, government fiscal policy, and the fact that it needs to send a credible signal to various categories of stakeholders. So the business community, it needs to send a credible signal to investors, it needs to send a credible signal to households, everyday people, you and I, like my grandmother in the village. And when you actually look at the projections that have come through and the things that are being proposed to be done, I think that it does answer most of those questions on that front. And also ties into the point that some of the panelists have made in terms of the confidence that Ghanaians in total and these other stakeholders have within the economy as a result of the macro stabilization that we have seen over the last 1.5 or so years, but particularly in the last 10 months, when you look at some of the headline macro indicators like the exchange rate and interest rate, as well as the reserves position and all the other indicators that are needed to support or make an objective assessment of where the economy is heading. I also do agree that, look, the real issue comes down to the execution, right? So one, the budget is setting a clear policy direction in terms of your priorities. And what the minister did communicate yesterday very clearly is these three, call it strategic priorities. One, consolidating the macro stabilization. Number two, accelerating transformation and job creation. And then number three, strengthening kind of social security. And this is kind of where it becomes really, really critical in terms of how that then becomes executed in the next 9 months. If you look at what has been done in the last 10 months, it gives a certain confidence to everyone and to these stakeholders that there is an expectation of more that can be done in terms of these three areas that I had indicated. But of course, it also comes off the back of some of the challenges that I just put out in my post. So if you were to ask me 2 years ago, would I have expected the CD to have actually gained about 30-something% to the dollar this year? I would have said no. Would I have expected the process of disinflation to have come down to single digits by the end of this year? I would have said no, because of the environment that we were in at that time. So now we have made this big consolidation effort. The real task and the real thing that the budget now tries to communicate is how we then translate this into the substantial reforms that are needed to allow us, expand the base, especially the agri side, and then the manufacturing side, and then of course also a bit of services, but importantly allow us to then diversify such that when you have left the IMF program, so our IMF program comes to an end next year, subject to whatever negotiations we have with them. But once you have left that, you have credible anchors in place. You have a credible growth strategy that you are executing to allow you to build the buffers to the extent that even if you have any major external economic shock, and the world we live in now is actually one of consistent shocks. Some of the research that I have seen, every 3 to sort of 5 years, you should expect something. So this is like the new normal. But it comes down to how you position your domestic economy, the hard reforms that are needed within your energy sector, the discipline that is needed in terms of budget execution and making sure that you stay within the bounds that have been put together. And I think that is the bit that this budget tries to communicate clearly to these different categories of stakeholders. And if you look at execution on the first quarter to the third quarter of 2025 trends, especially on the expenditure side, it does send a positive signal. So for example, we know that compensation of employees is actually up on this year alone by about 1%. The goods and services budget has actually come down by about 25%. And then likely when you also look at the capital expenditure, that has come down. That is why some people say, oh, we are not seeing, things happening. But actually, when you unpack those numbers and you look at where the monies were going to, there are a lot of inefficiencies, within these two budget expenditure lines. And some rationalization is taking place, as well. On the positive side, on the expenditure side, because of the savings that we've had as a result of the debt restructuring, interest payments is actually down by almost about 19 percentage points based on the Q1 to Q3 trends, right? So in one sense, we are making gains in certain areas. In others, we actually have scaled back a little bit, some more. The real thing now going forward comes down to the point, I think it was the KPMG person made in the room, right? How you execute this. So you've had the consolidation, you've had the turnaround, the CD relatively stable, inflation importantly is within the band or the target that the central bank has set, which is between 6 to 10%. How do we collectively leverage that to drive the transformation that we all want to see? And transformation doesn't happen overnight, but you need to take certain practical steps. And I think very clearly in my mind that what this budget has sought to do is to push or nudge us in that right sense of direction. And then fundamentally comes down to what we do in terms of the execution in the years and in the months ahead.
Now, next year, we understand that we will start paying some of these debts that we restructured. Again, government wants to spend on big push and ensure that the economy is really on the path that they all desire. In the trend, in all of that, how do we ensure that we don't derail from the path we are on?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of work that is being done within the various government ministries. So one of the big ones you could talk about is the issue of commitment controls or commitment authorization. So within the PFM system, the public financial management system that Ghana runs, it has been systematically flagged. So if you look at various PEFA reports from 2018 and onwards, that we had issues with commitment control. And some of the safeguards that have been put in place now going forward really comes down to you cannot spend over a certain amount without having a certificate or a document that allows you to do that. There's also going to be all these regular or periodic review of the expenditure side of the equation. So for example, every quarter, all the different MMDAs, all the different government agencies are going to have to more or less, justify what they are spending on, and importantly, justify it along the lines of value for money. Number three, there is the Fiscal Council that is also being passed in law within the amended PFM Act, but is yet to be constituted. The Fiscal Council is going to be more or less Ghana's equivalent of the Office for Budget Responsibility, or in the US, the Congressional Budget Office, to add an additional layer of checks and balances on government spending. There is also the Office for Value for Money, and the minister, I think, did indicate within the budget that the bill will be tabled before the House, and I'm particularly looking forward to that. So what I'm basically trying to say is that there are these internal, call it safeguards, that the government is trying to kind of put in place. And then beyond the internal safeguards, especially when the IMF leaves town, because remember that based on our history, most times when we're under an IMF program, we tend to do relatively well. And then when we leave the program, things start to go awry. So based on that history, you need some additional external checks and balances. And this is where I think that the Fiscal Council and the Independent Fiscal Council and then the Office for Value for Money and other things that are being done outside of, call it, the mainstream government becomes extremely important in ensuring that you are not going to spend beyond your means. So of course, the real proof of the pudding is going to come when we leave, for example, the IMF program. But I'm relatively confident that some of the safeguards that are being put in place now would help to put some brakes on the pressures that we see when it comes to government spending, and especially in the lead up to election years.
All right, I'm grateful to you, Theo Champon. Stay with us. Let me come in studio and bring in Professor Body. So, Prof, I mean, businesses were looking forward to the tax reforms. with what the finance minister announced in the budget, I mean, in real sense, how will businesses now start to see the benefit of the new tax reforms that have been brought? If you are getting us for the ordinary Ghanaian to really understand what's in it for them.
Yeah, Bless, I think...
Because if you listen to them, it says they are going to eliminate the decoupling of GET Fund and NHIL levies from the VAT tax base to make them eligible for input tax deduction, remove VAT on reconnaissance and prospecting of minerals, and reduce the effective VAT rate from 21.9 to 20%. So if I'm an ordinary business owner, how will this benefit me?
Good question. You know, the 2025 budget focused on consolidation and recovery. But with 2026, it's looking at more of expansion. But I'll come to the revenue betting. I mean, what problems we have with revenue generation. It is always good when a government wants to say, I want to take tax off your shoulders. Businesses will be happy. Ordinary persons will be happy. And this was a key thing in the manifesto of the NDC, the 21 days, that they were going to scrap the levies, the taxes. Indeed, they did removed. And they were left with, I think, this. And this was all over. Government take away the COVID tax from our shoulders for us to move on. Finally, it's been removed, and a bill will be passed. I'm sure we have about 10 or so bills the minister mentioned that some amendments will be sent to the parliament. And there's one, the COVID levy.
Yesterday they laid it.
Yes, yesterday they laid it.
Yeah, they laid some of the bills. This was included.
Yes. So what it means, it gives a good signal to the ordinary Ghanaian. It gives a good signal to the business community. And colleagues were here the last time talking about the reasons why the government must take off the COVID levy. So if you're a business person and you hear this story, you know that at least you would think government, you've gotten some money into your pocket, into your business, because you are not going to pay that money to the government again. So in terms of your production, you are likely to have a reduction in what you do, the businesses that you do. So obviously there's an impact. And that would form part of your profit and loss, I mean, your income, I mean, comprehensive income statement. So obviously, there will be an impact in terms of business growth. It's a welcome news. And in any day, everybody, a business person, would love to hear this story. And I said that on the other platforms, that it appears the administration once in a while or tries to take care of the promises made. And going after them one by one. But let's flip the discussions and change the emphasis. Whenever you take off a revenue item from what you want, it will have an implication. So I was looking at ways of this administration getting revenue, funds to support what is going to take away. Because if you scrap COVID, it's almost about 3.something billion, 3.5 or so.
Yes.
That will be taken off in terms of revenue. How is the government going to get money to shoulder or take care of our expenditure? Go back to 2025, actuals. Tax revenue and grants had stood about 8.3% of the GDP. So actually, in actual sense, government is struggling in terms of revenue mobilization. Look at the figures we have this morning, we have been told. Check the numbers, and you realize that this is the highest revenue projections that we have seen over so many years, 260 something.
But Prof, in terms of plugging the loophole created by the COVID-19, isn't that why he says the deficit, there will be deficit, and then you would have to find means of servicing the deficit? If you take away COVID-19, as they have, there will be a gap created. Yeah. But that is why there is a budget deficit, right? that you have to look for other sources to come to deal with it. Not so. And he's shown how they are going to finance that.
Well, if you look at, I'm trying to find out the practical approach of blocking the loopholes. You see, you can have major programs, reforms, but in terms of the structural reforms to contain this, may become problematic. If you want to get revenue scrapped, I don't have a problem because business always will look for other means of the government, not in terms of looking at your revenue stream. You always plan with your revenue and as well as your expenditure. But the figures we have seen, my good friend, it helps anytime you are doing analysis. The point is that you should look at your revenue, you look at your expenditure. But what we are seeing today, yes, we have seen major signs of recovery, major signs of improvement in the economy. But the sustainability is what we are talking about. Businesses are always looking for ways to make things happen in their businesses. But what are we seeing today? Major expansion projects. But check the figures that we have here. Total revenue, last year, 226 billion. Today, we are looking at 1 billion. Almost about 18% increment of your revenue. But we are told these revenue generations are going to predominantly be generated through digitalization and AI reforms. And you said it in the budget.
At the port, and yes.
At the port. Already we are struggling. I don't know why this AI thing has appeared here again. I don't know. If you look at such revenue generation, and it's through this means, I'm worried because you rightly indicated this year, debt overhang. We are going to have service all these debts in 2026. You drop your revenue, we are cool, we are fine. But the ways of generating same revenue to show up is where my challenge is on this budget.
Okay.
That's my challenge.
Let me bring in Hamza then, for Hamza to answer. Hamza, his concern is how you can deal with the loopholes, structural reforms to deal with deficits.
I can address that question as well.
Okay, so I'll come to you after Hamza. Hamza, yes.
I think you allow it is better.
Okay, let me listen to you. Prof, let me come to you for you to help us with the answer.
No. So, I mean, yes, Prof is right that, yes, the revenue projection seems big. You're moving from 227 roughly, right, in this year to 268 million. But actually, if you go back and you do the historical analysis in terms of the revenue projections and the trends over the last 5-6 years, on a year-on-year basis, the increment that you're seeing here is not that different from what we had in other, prior years. That's the first thing. The second point, which is the important one, is when you actually work out the revenue projection as a share of GDP, which is really the most critical thing here, even in the IMF program and the other fiscal anchors that we have, it comes down to what share of your revenue as a proportion of the GDP that you're using to work your numbers. And actually, when you do those and you look at the projections, it's no more than what we have, right, currently in 2025, right? So the economic base is going to grow, and the denominator, what you use to divide the nominal figure, is still relatively within the bounds that, one is good. So that's the other thing. The other point to also note is that even when you have your revenue, for argument's sake, struggling, what we have seen in the past, not just in the current government, you can go back 2021, 22, during COVID and all of that, you have a commensurate adjustment on the expenditure side of the equation to balance things out, right? And this is important because you're not going to the capital market, especially the external ones, to borrow, right, anymore. So it really comes down to proactive economic policy management, to the point that if at any point in time you're struggling with revenues, for argument's sake, because of internal issues, it could be external shocks, COVID, like we saw, and all of that, you do have to make a commensurate, right, adjustment on the expenditure side. Hence why when you see the overall fiscal balance, and that was a question I think you're trying to pose to Prof. The balance is still contained within the 2.2% deficit figure that has been communicated within this budget. And so really sort of what many market watchers would be watching comes down to, okay, one, the revenue share in nominal terms, but importantly also as a share of GDP. The same thing on the expenditure side, what you're going to spend your money on, which areas you're spending your money on, how does this change or has it changed on a year-on-year basis compared to, say, the last 5 years? And then number three, importantly, how you are going to finance the gap between your revenue and your expenditure, right? Which is the deficit. And the deficit would include what you're spending on your interest, right, servicing costs. And this is, again, very important because it ties into the other dimension of the problem, or call it the primary balance or surplus, depending on how you look at it. And since we passed the amended PFM Act with these two new fiscal rules, the first fiscal rule says that you have to run a primary surplus of 1.5% consistently every year, right? The primary surplus is your revenue and your expenditure, but you are not including your interest, debt servicing costs within that. If you look at the numbers from just the last few months, right, and you can even go back to last year as well, we've been running a positive primary surplus. But particularly in the last 10 months to the end of this year, we're going to hit that 1.5% right target. So all the point I'm just trying to make is that, yes, the revenue projections seem big. However, when you take them into account in a more sort of holistic manner, and with the corresponding adjustment that government may have to do should the revenues not live up to expectations, which I don't think would be, but just for argument's sake. And the fact that you have to also communicate this ultimately will show in your deficit and your primary surplus or deficit numbers, then I think that it comes down to the fact that do we see and have we seen signs to make us worry that, the revenue numbers don't make kind of sense. Okay. I don't think that is the case. And like I've said, in the past, when even revenues have not performed as much, we've always had a corresponding adjustment on the expenditure side of the equation to balance the numbers out. So I just thought, I chipped this one in just to put things in the right context.
Okay. Hamza.
Yes, briefly, Kojo, I think that it is important to even link your initial question to Prof on the implications of the COVID levy on businesses and to what my brother earlier on said about the execution of the budget. And I responded by saying that sometimes it has to do with the integrity commitment on the part of government. And if you are familiar with the details of the 2025 budget, you would realize that many of these policy interventions were signaled in that budget, where the finance minister indicated his readiness to have a review of the VAT broad-based system and ensure that it is in line with many of the estimates that were making the rounds in terms of the African continent in particular. Because I think Ghana was among the highest when it comes to our VAT rate. And that was the reason why he made a commitment in that budget to review it. Quite apart from that, COVID levy also featured in prominently. And we have shown commitment in executing those pledges that we made in relation to the 2025 budget. It should be basis for many to be hopeful that many of the commitments we are making in the 2026 budget, especially when it comes to fiscal prudence, are commitments that we'll see through. And Kojo, as for the economic implications on businesses, like he indicated, we are estimating approximately 3.7 billion Ghana cedis that otherwise would have come to government will stay in the coffers of the private businesses as a result of just COVID levy alone. the removal of COVID levy. What this means is that businesses would have the opportunity to either expand in terms of the services they deliver or invest in other new opportunities that they can take advantage of. And that is what you do, making financing available to the private sector. And if you look at the overall implications of even the review of VAT, the estimates are that hopefully in the next 1 year, government should be able to free up in excess of about 6.3 billion that otherwise would have come to government as a result of COVID and VAT reforms of 20. Now this is what will be available to the business community for them to explore in terms of investment opportunities.
So money that they should have given to government to stay with them.
That is a commitment to supporting the private sector. And I can understand the concerns being expressed by my brother, especially when it comes to references to the fact that, okay, and mind you, there are capital injections too to the banking sector, NIB, Agricultural Development Bank, and of course CBG. What this means is that even businesses would be able to access capital from many of these recapitalized banks, especially in a system where interest rates are low. So this budget is not just grounded in the usual promises that we churn out as a political class. It also signals, based on action, that indeed this year or the next year is going to be different. And that commitment is key. And Doc, I can understand your concerns, especially when it comes to what you would term as leakages, what's the name? Revenue shortages on the part of government as a result of these interventions. But mind you, even when we're taking out e-levy, we had those concerns. And we provided a befitting response to you. Again, the Honorable Dr. Kesela Tuforsen indicated to you that those monies, though we were taking out e-levy, we had found another interesting way of replacing sin through the tax refund account, if you remember, that the previous administration was abusing. And like he indicated, so far, we've not had any major challenges as far as 2025 is concerned in terms of our recovery journey. Indeed, many of us are proud of that recovery journey. So let us be confident. The AI you seek to undermine, even the world is transitioning towards that era, especially when it comes to revenue mobilization. And he made us know that in the ports alone, Ghana lost approximately 31 billion because of leakages. There is the need for us to plug these loopholes and ensure that we take advantage of that sector to at least complement many of these interventions that he has thrown out that you deem as ways of losing revenue on the part of government. So we are not behaving like the previous regime, where we just take advantage of the political atmosphere, throw out jargons, make promises, when in reality, we are not committed to see. When this government proposes that it will do this, and there are financial implications on that, it also proposes ways of making up for such shortages. And that is what needs to be commended. And like I indicated earlier on, Prof, many of you are fortunate to be part of a system now where your views, exciting or not to the government, would be entertained. Because we are not a group of people who pride ourselves as having all the solutions to the economic challenges of this country. We know the role the private sector plays. We know the role the likes of you would have to play as far as our economic recovery journey and consolidation is concerned. And that is why this is not just an NDC budget. This is a budget signaling the commitment of the NDC's administration to collectively work with all sectors to ensure that at least, if for nothing at all, we begin to action the cause that there is the need for Ghana to change the structure of our economy. So it does not become lip service. We give action to it, and that is what this is signaling. And mind you, Kojo, the injections in the road sector alone, Prof, in excess of about 30 billion. This government appreciates that no matter the investments we make, especially in the agriculture sector, if our roads are not linked to commercial centers, many of these investments will go to waste. It is the reason why His Excellency President Mahama has decided once again to be interested in the big push agenda. And it has already commenced. Doc also made references to the 3 or 4 pronged approach that underscores this budget and talked about the issue of what I call strengthening governance, and I think the finance minister made references to that, and that of skills training. Again, because of your concern about execution, in the 2025 budget, that signal was given in terms of skills training, that there's a need for us to prioritize it. The Ministry of Finance for 2025 released in excess of about 300 million Ghana cedis to the National Apprenticeship Program. About 10,000 or so youth have already been engaged and they are undergoing training in various skills. Hopefully in the next 3 or 4 or 5 months, many of them will graduate. They will be supported with initial capital and startup tools to be able to run their own businesses. And this is how you create sustainable jobs. We do not want to behave like the MPP by simply pointing to the number of people that we employ in the public services. And in most cases, also inflating the figures. If you remember, but Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia was mentioning 2.6 million.
The MPP also cited private sector.
I'm coming. Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia was mentioning 2.6 million. Their employment minister was mentioning 3 million, in some cases 5.6 million. And it had to do with public sector employments. Every government, in one way or the other, we find our way of recruiting people into the public sector. But because of the political nature of these recruitments, many of these public institutions are beginning to suffer, because they are being given more hands than they actually require. There's the need for us to begin to think outside the box. And so we should be measured by the number of private jobs we are able to help throw out. And that is the essence of the 24-hour economy and the overriding objective of the investments that this government is leading in the agriculture sector.
Okay, all right. Let me bring you in, Amos. Yeah, you want to make a point?
To add to the revenue measures, I think some of the tax reforms that we are seeing, so the simplification of the VAT, for instance, should encourage more compliance.
Okay.
And if more people are complying, then you expect that
more revenue will go up.
And the government has also indicated that they will be giving incentives for people to actually, for people to report their VAT that they are, paying. Which should lead to more compliance. Then there's also the AI that has been mentioned, that AI is going to be used at the ports to really make sure that the human interaction is reduced and for more revenue to be generated. There's also the cooperation with other countries, international bodies, to make sure that multinationals are also paying taxes, especially in terms of businesses that are transacted electronically. So these are things that should also help to improve the revenue. So we see that in terms of the revenue projections or estimates, it's going up by 18%. Okay. Right? Whereas expenditure is going up by 20%. So there's still...
There's 18 and 20, so 18, it's on 2%.
Exactly. So there's still that gap.
So it means the deficit becomes the 2%? So but the deficit will be higher than...
That's the increment.
Pardon?
I mean, that's the increment.
Yeah, so that's the increment.
Okay.
That's the increment. But in terms of the primary...
surplus.
Yes, I think the minister mentioned 1.5, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. But again, it comes back to execution, because we have 1 year to implement the budget.
Okay.
The budget is a short-term, policy driving us to our long-term goal. So we have 1 year to implement. So these measures that we have here, how quickly are we going to execute on them and make sure that they translate into the revenue that we are looking for?
In your survey, did business talk about government intervention or resort to borrowing from domestic market and how that impacts them? Did they raise that issue?
So they did not raise that issue directly, but what they mentioned is that they want access to cheaper, funding, finance. And obviously, one way to do that, letting the private sector have more access, is the government borrowing less from the banks, right? Because banks see government as risk-free and rather give their money to the government than to the private sector. So if government is borrowing less, then there is access. But then that necessarily doesn't also solve the problem, because banks are giving to government because they see the private sector as risky. So even if the government is not in the game, would they still continue to see the private sector as risky, or they will continue to give? But a measure that we have seen in the reading is the Women's Development Bank, right? So the government says, I am putting 400, is it
400 million?
400 million out there, to really capitalize the Women's Development Bank. And it's the minimum capital requirement to set up a bank.
And they are given 1 million for the office setup.
Exactly.
So according to the minister, you don't touch the 400 we are giving you.
Okay. So it means there will be a category of businesses that will be having access to cheaper funding. Exactly the modalities for the bank, it's yet to come out. So again, execution.
Okay. Let me bounce this at you, Dr. Fia Champon. How must it be done such that government in its aim to deal with budget deficit and not returning to the international capital market will not also crowd out the private sector as it wants to help that sector to grow?
Yeah, I think on the how to be done on the borrowing front, it comes down to communicating this clearly to market participants. So, every month, every 3 months, the government issues what they call there's an issuance calendar for borrowings in terms of the treasury bills, the 1-year notes, and then all those, other things. The how bit, I think, comes down to the consistency and the fidelity with which government follows that calendar. Because what then tends to happen, well, let me take a step back. If you look at the treasury bill rates and then the yield curve and all of that, in the last kind of 1.5 years, you've seen that consistently coming down, and a big jump, downward trend in the last 10 months. Which then signals that the cost of government borrowing is getting cheaper, and you see that in the numbers. The bit that has to be clearly communicated going forward in 2026 is the consistency with which then we follow that borrowing calendar, and the extent then to which this balances out on the fiscal side of the equation, Okay. The deficit. And then the surplus numbers that we're talking, about here. And that is really the bit that, in my former experience working within the market space in the City of London and other places, people would be really looking out for to see, okay, are we seeing signs of what people call fiscal stress, which we indicated by the extent to which government goes to these domestic capital market to borrow, because we still can't access the external, capital market. Yeah. And that for me would be sort of the telltale sign. But importantly, what you're seeing is that, and I think I made this point, over the last 3-4 years, whenever we are having revenues not doing as well as we expect, we've always had a compensating adjustment on the expenditure side of the equation. So it comes down to execution, bottom line. And then it comes down to the consistency with which we're able to follow through the things that we say we're going to be doing. And I think the government has sent a clear signal based on the 2025 budget fiscals that it intends to follow that going forward. And we need to all, ensure or hold the government up to its feet in terms of delivering on that. But I am relatively confident that the issue of the crowding out, which has always been a problem of the private sector vis-a-vis government borrowing, is something that we can sort of put to the back burner now, and then getting real credit to go to the private sector, the real credit to go to the real sector of the economy, and getting the borrowing rates coming down. And just a quick point on that, finalize it comes down to also what the central bank does, right, in terms of the policy rate. Because we've seen the process of the disinflation ongoing, and we're likely to end the year with, or stay the year within the single-digit band, I would expect that when the central bank meets during its next, the policy rate, MPC meets during its next meeting, the policy rate will be further adjusted, downwards, ultimately to come down maybe around the 15 percentage point band. That would then allow real credit to flow into the economy, and you can then pick that up in other indicators like broad money supply and other things to kind of measure the extent to which people are getting access to credit, and businesses are also doing the same.
Dr. Theo Ashampon, I'm grateful to you. He is a technical advisor at the Ministry of Finance. That's where time will allow us. I'm grateful to you, gentlemen, for coming. Prof, my time has run out. I need to move on now. Professor Zigbodi is Dean, Accounting and Finance, UPSA.
And of course, congratulations to the new Chief Justice. But you see, it is important.
I said that my time is up. But
you see, it is only proper for us. That is an important arm of government.
Which one?
Your appointment of a new Chief Justice.
No, you've said it. You've mentioned it.
It's an important arm of government, and there's the need for us to congratulate him and urge him to at least pursue research even within the judiciary, so that Ghanaians can No, it's important. Are you telling me that there's everything right about
everything is right with the judiciary? Right?
You think so?
Right.
Ghanaians will disagree with you, especially those who use our courts on daily basis.
You have time.
And sometimes
you didn't give us
Prof, you know how I'm
But other challenge I have with this budget, would the infrastructure promises be met? That's my challenge.
We'll keep an eye on it.
In fact, that's the point.
Absolutely.
57 billion for infrastructure.
Yeah.
Last year, 26, spent 10. Would this promise be realized?
Okay, all right. Professor Zigbodi is Dean Accounting and Finance of the UPSA. Hamza Soyeni is a lawyer and a member of the NDC's communications team. And then Mr. Amos Ansa is with the PwC. KPMG, I almost switched your companies there. He is an associate director at KPMG. We'll take a break here. We'll be back with more. But you know what? We're going to talk about strokes. Why is stroke taking a lot of lives? And how can you prevent yourself from getting stroke? And also talk about the NCDs, which the budget also spoke about. Stay with us.